let's see. Today is April 9, 2015. I'm here in Cedar Falls with Dick Halstead, and I am Jean Richardson. Dick, thank you very much for doing this for us. We really appreciate it. So when and where did you attend rural school?
Okay, I attended country school in Fayette County. The name of the school was Rolling Green number 6. And you probably want to know what years this would have been. I started first grade in 1939 and finished the 8th grade in 1947.
Okay.
I believe that adds up to 8 years.
8 years, all right. How far away did you and your family live?
It was approximately 1.5 miles, and it would have been northeast, cutting across the field and going down a dirt road, a mile.
What tasks did you have to perform before leaving for school?
Well, usually we had to help with the milking. They were milking cows by hand. And I also had to feed the bucket calves, you know. That was this kid's job.
Okay. And did you have help?
Yes, I had 2 brothers. One brother was 2 years older than I was. I was the middle one of 3 sons. And the younger one was 15 months. And then we were followed up by a sister. I think she was 5 years younger, so she probably didn't get in on that.
And would more of her work been inside? Would more of her work have been inside the house and not
Yes,
so
it
much in
would
the
have
barn?
been. Yes.
And with your mother?
Yeah.
What did you wear to school?
Well, we wore, I guess you call it overalls. And I think at one time, first, we probably even wore suspenders, you know.
Okay.
My mom used to make shirts, and they had feed sacks then that had print, and they were nice looking, you know, but the material was probably rather coarse. And she made shirts out of that, and we probably wore that a lot of the time.
So did it feel scratchy if it was
A little
coarse?
bit, yes.
And how did the winter clothing differ from what you wore in warmer
Okay.
weather?
Well, in the winter, being the fact we had to walk that far, when it was extremely cold, we wore long underwear. So we had a lining under our overalls. Winter cap with the covers over the ears, and I think the mittens had liners, you know, they would be a leather, you know, just the mitten type with a heavy, probably wool liner.
Approximately what time did you leave for school?
Well, usually we would leave at 7:15 to 7:20 in that area.
And how did you get there?
Well, usually we walked to school. We would walk up the road, and our neighbor would let us cross his field. And so it was a total of 1.5 miles altogether. Sometimes someone would pick us up. There was one family that was a rather poor family. They had a horse-drawn, it looked like a covered wagon. It was made of some kind of plywood, and I remember it was curved, and sometimes they would pick us up. And usually, we couldn't depend on that because sometimes they were late to school. So, because they had another, I think they had another mile to go, so.
So you had two brothers to walk with most of the time?
Yes.
Anybody else in the neighborhood that you picked up along the way?
No, because we were the only kids on the first mile.
Do you remember anything about those walks? Any of the sights or sounds
Well,
along the way?
The sounds we would hear, probably we'd hear a lot of birds, you know, meadowlarks and this type of thing. You'd see cattle and you'd hear cattle bawling off on the distance. And roosters crowing. I think those are the main sounds that I recall.
And then you mentioned the lilacs.
Yes, the lilacs came out in the course of the spring and they smelled so fresh and so forth. It was sort of juvenating, I guess you'd say, that you knew that spring was
Okay.
at hand.
Describe your schoolhouse and its surroundings for me.
Okay. Well, the house, it was a white schoolhouse, of course, just a small building, and it was surrounded by some lilac bushes, and I think there were 7 or 8 large maple trees. They were good for climbing for us kids because they had a lot of branches and so forth. We had a flagpole and let's see, 2 teeter-totters and a slide. And I think that's about it.
Do you remember any outbuildings at all?
There was an outhouse at one time too.
At one time, so you...
Well, I think we more or less had the pit toilet inside on one end of the building. I remember the boys went to their right and the girls went to their left.
Okay. Never the two shall meet. What did you do once you arrived at school?
Well, if the teacher was there or was just coming, we would offer to help get the fire going. We would just get the materials, a little bit of coal and of course wood first. And we did not actually start the fire. She wouldn't let us do that, of course. And we also tried to warm up. We were usually cold. Sometimes the erasers needed dusting, and we of course would have to do that outside. And we'd beat those against the siding.
Okay.
And so they'd be fresh and clean for writing.
We're going to skip a page and go to the next
Oh,
page.
different page. I'm sorry.
Okay, I think, yeah, and then we'll come back to this one.
Okay. This is-
Okay, what did you do first upon entering the schoolhouse?
Well, of course, we'd hang our coat up, and then we would ask the teacher if there was anything we could do. I think we considered ourselves great volunteers.
Okay.
We've tried to be thoughtful, you know, because there's always some little task that she might want us to do, and I'm talking about she because I had a lady teacher, three lady teachers and 1 man teacher in the 8-year period.
What items were in your classroom?
Well, there was the Victrola, of course. We had to have that, of course, for sound technology. And there was an old piano, which we used when we had like a Christmas program or something special.
So you didn't use that every day?
No.
Okay.
Well, I think they would sing a few songs. I don't remember doing that every day. There was no sand table. I see that's on the sheet here. And of course, kind of crude wood desk. And we had one large chalkboard. And I believe we had a few slates that the students could use to write on and like work problems and so forth, you know.
How big would the slates have been? How big would the
Oh,
slates have been?
I would say they were maybe 16 inches, something like that. Just nice size to handle.
What kinds of supplies did your school have besides the slates?
The science, okay. Oh, well, we had books, of course. And I don't remember a library or anything like that. And she probably had a few reference books. I mean, they were probably pretty general.
Encyclopedia, maybe?
I believe we had an encyclopedia.
Dictionary? Dictionary.
We had to have a dictionary.
Maps?
There were several maps.
What kinds of things did you and your family have to supply?
The only thing I remember supplying was pencils, and of course we didn't use pens very much. And I think that was the only thing. I think everything else was furnished.
Like crayons?
Well, we had to buy crayons now and then, yes.
Any paper? Did you have a big chief tablet?
Yes, we had to have tablets, something to write on,
And where did you get those things that you supplied?
well, general store. This would have been county seat town,
Near West Union?
West Union.
Okay, so this school is near West Union?
2 miles,
2 miles.
southeast
Okay,
of West Union.
all right. When did your school day begin?
Usually around 8:15 in the morning. And I don't remember exactly when we got out. It must have been around 3:30 p.m.
You had a long day.
It seemed like it was a long day.
And what activities began the day once the students were at their seats?
Okay. Well, once they got in the building, of course, they'd sit down like they're expected. And I remember we had the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. We had that every day.
And do you remember how the teacher organized the school's day's lessons?
Okay. Well, of course, we had 8 grades, and it seemed like each grade had their own specific things to work on. And like she might meet with the first grade, and they would discuss the lesson and so forth. And while the other grades would be working on their materials, their assignments, and then she'd meet with them. But it was impossible to meet with everyone and cover all the subjects in one day. There just wasn't time permitting.
So what did she do?
Well, I think she like science. She probably would have science maybe 3 times a week or something like that. And she kind of rotated it so everything was covered.
many were in your class?
All the way from 1 up till 3, up through 3. I remember probably, I was the only one in my class for a lot of those years, but I don't know exactly how many that would be.
How many in the school, usually?
I think we reached around 20 at the maximum, because people would move away then if they were on the farm and rented a farm, and of course, you know, 1st of March they would be moving, and they might move out of the district, you know.
How did the day's experiences vary between the grade levels?
Okay. Vary between the grade levels? Well, I would say that the learning was more in depth. The higher the grade, the deeper they got into it, as far as explaining the lessons.
What are some lessons that you remember?
Well, one I definitely remember was measuring things with like a yardstick. I mean, I'm talking about a small distance now. We were concerned with, you know, how wide something was, how long it was, and how it was shaped, you know. This aroused our curiosity to explore, I guess you would say. Also, multiplying and dividing. I know as a family we were very interested in that, in working math problems, and also remembering facts. We thought it was best if you'd remember a certain amount of facts, and I know we don't do as much memorizing today as we don't have to, of course, because we have the accessibility to gain that material when we need it. And I believe listening to stories, you know, I think these were the main things that I recall.
What was your favorite subject?
Mine happened to be math and science.
Do you know why?
Well, probably science. And that's what I'm best qualified for today, is supposedly I'm supposed to be able to teach all the sciences except physics, and I just haven't had enough courses in physics.
What was your least favorite?
Least favorite was probably music, because I didn't consider myself having much music in me, I guess. Didn't think I had the ability to sing. I just wasn't confident.
How much did you interact with others during your lessons?
Okay. Well, I remember that they tried to challenge you, you know, if you gave an answer and another student didn't agree with it, they would probably challenge us with questions, you know, to see who's really more right than the other one. I think this was good, but it was always done in a friendly manner, you know, constructive criticism. And whenever we were taught not to try to put anyone down or diminish someone, you always give someone credit, and sometimes it's maybe hard to see all the good things that they do, but they deserve an opportunity too to express themselves.
Did your teacher have any helpers?
I don't remember any helpers.
What rules do you remember that your classroom had?
The general rules, of course, well, stay in your seat and be quiet. Do not speak out unless you're called upon. I guess. Okay, and we were always taught that if you're ever going to say something bad about a person or anything, if you can't say something good, don't say anything. We were taught that, and I think that went a long ways. It kept a person out of trouble and maintained a lot better relations between students.
Do you remember any discipline techniques that your teachers used to reinforce these rules?
Okay, well, one, look at you very sternly, of course. And they'd always remind you, we can tell your mother or your father or what. I think they were very effective because it seemed like they never forgot when they needed to do something like that, because there was always follow-up. And the strange thing about it, it seemed like the parents responded so well then, because they had a genuine interest in how their son or daughter were doing.
What were your classroom procedures for going to the restrooms?
Okay. Well, you had to put your hand up, of course, and if they were having class, you just had to be patient and wait your turn. Of course, one boy or one girl, and it had to be timely too. They didn't expect you to take too much time out either, but you had to get the teacher's attention, but at appropriate time.
And how did you get her attention?
What's that?
How did you get the teacher's attention?
Well, you'd usually put your hand up and maybe look that teacher's way, and wait when it was the proper time to do something like that. You could see that they weren't talking. If they were talking to the class or teaching, we probably would wait till there was a little break.
So you knew what a good time was.
Right.
How did you know it was time for lunch?
Usually they would ring a small bell, like a handbell or something like that, if we were, of course, inside. And if we were outside, then the teacher might ring the large bell.
On top of the building?
On top of the...
Did you ever get to ring that bell?
I remember ringing it a few times. But it seemed like it wasn't abused. The students didn't seem to bother it, because it seemed like it pulled rather hard.
Okay.
Maybe they didn't relish that too much.
Now let's go back to the page we skipped.
Okay.
So you brought your lunch.
Yes.
What did you carry in it?
Well, of course, it was homemade bread. And we'd make a sandwich. It might be just a butter sandwich. It could be, I think we had peanut butter then, we must have had. And sometimes we'd have meat sandwiches because we butchered several animals each year. We had our own meat on the farm, and that would be both beef and pork. We ate quite a bit of fruit, what was available. Apples, we liked oranges, and our mom would bake real excellent cookies. And of course, we shouldn't have eaten that many of them, but we did, I guess. That's about all I remember. She probably baked other things once in a while, but we didn't go to the convenience store and buy some. There, of course, wasn't any.
Where were the lunch pails kept?
On the one end of the classroom, there was a shelf, and they just put them on this shelf.
And you had a tin lunchbox.
Yes, just an old tin, and it got pretty well dented up, it seems like, by the time we were through with it.
Where and when did you eat lunch?
If the weather was bad or inclement weather, we'd eat inside. It seemed like we'd just eat at our desk. And when it was nice, we'd eat outside.
How did your meals compare to those of other students?
Comparable to other students. Some students always had larger portions than other, and we kind of considered that there wasn't much variety. It was pretty much the same old thing over and over.
How long was lunchtime?
At least a half an hour, 30, 35 minutes.
What did you do at recess time?
Well, after we were at recess, usually we would play, I guess. And I remember the teacher would play with us. When we played games like the anti-over, throwing the ball over, and you'd always love to catch something and then make some other student be the it.
Okay, all right.
And they would also set up the croquet set, the regular course that you would play. And of course, a lot of times we had to play by ourselves on like teeter-totters and slide and things like that.
Ever any softball games?
Occasionally we would play, but not a lot of ball then, it didn't seem like.
How did the country school day end?
Well, one thing that we had to take turns was to take the flag down. And they tried to teach us how to fold the flag properly, not touching the ground ever, and so forth. Or, I think that was the main duty we had to take care of. And that sort of rotated. They considered that an honor to be able to retire the flag at the end of the school day.
Let's talk about your teachers. Who were your teachers and for what grades?
Okay. Well, I had a total of 4 teachers. And I can say the first name for the first one. Bernice was her name. She was a rather tall person. She was very nice. She seemed to be one of the nicest of all, maybe all 4 of them. And she always tried to be friendly to everyone. And she taught she was there 3 years. So I would have had her 3 years in a row. And she had, I believe, she had I assumed it was her daughter. Her name was Norma. She was a redhead. She was a very nice student, but I don't know whether she had a husband or not. That never came up. And we didn't ask, of course.
Was Norma in your school too?
Yes, she would come to school, well, as long as your mom was teaching.
Okay, all right. Did Bernice live in the area?
They lived out in the country, I'd say about 2 miles from there. It was a very large house. If you were to drive down the road, you could recognize a real large 2-story house. Okay.
So after Bernice, you had,
Then, the next one, let's see. I don't remember the first name. I called her Goats or Gotch or something. And she was there 2 years, and I remember I was in the 4th and 5th grade then. She was more strict, but she was still likable. She did it in such a way, you know, you didn't feel that she's offending you when she corrected you. And I think that was good qualities about her. She was a very good teacher too. Then came the 6th grade, and we had our first man teacher. His name was Harold. And he was a very likable teacher, but he only stayed 1 year. He didn't like teaching country school. And I think he got in the grocery store business after that. Apparently, teaching wasn't his pride and joy.
did you have a feel for that while he was your teacher, that he wasn't really enjoying this? Did you have,
Yes, we could pick that
you
up.
could tell that?
Now, he had an idea that he thought I should skip the 7th grade and go right on, and I could be a year ahead. I don't know where he got that idea, but of course I mentioned it to my parents, and of course they said, no, you're not going to do that. But he recognized the abilities in certain students, you know. Then the last 2 years, the 7th and 8th grade, I had Ruby. And she was a very professional teacher. As a matter of fact, I think she taught, between 50 and 60 years. And she was very likable, and I remember when she was 96 years old, living in West Junior. Of course, we know her husband very well. He was a good car mechanic. And my brother and I paid a visit to her. And it seemed like she really knew who we were. You know, we were amazed.
In her 90s.
Right. She was 96 and her mind was just as good as ever. And she lived to just about 100, I believe. But she was very rare. I guess she had a great mind on her. And she was probably the best overall, you know. Okay. So
where did your teachers live?
okay. Well, let's see. I told you where Bernice lived in the country. The others all lived in town. Let's see. I think in West Union, and I think Harold lived closer to the town of Elgin. He was from that area. I guess we really didn't know exactly where he lived.
How often did you see your teachers outside of the school day?
Occasionally, you might see him in a store or at church. Now, Ruby, the seventh and the last one that taught when we were in school, she would be making some trips to Owine, and we thought that was a real treat. The teacher asking us to, if we like to ride along, you know. And there was a family that used to go to Rolling Green. They lived on the farm, and they apparently left the farm, and he had employment in Owine area. And we'd get to visit him, and we thought that was really something special, you know. And I remember going down there a couple times with her. I mean, we didn't suggest it, but she was just nice to ask us. So, and so I guess we were a little closer to her as far as we just knew her better and so forth. And I didn't mention, I guess, that my younger brother was only 15 months younger. And I guess he and I were very close. And so we were probably the ones that got to go. And I imagine the older brother probably had to stay with Dad and work, you know. That would have been on a Saturday, of course.
What roles did the students have in the upkeep of the classroom?
I remember sweeping the floor. Maybe putting shades up or down or something like that. Not really too much, I guess, as far as upkeep. Seemed like the teacher, they just did everything then. I mean, it wasn't even noticeable. It just seemed like it wasn't obvious. I mean, we knew somebody had to be doing it.
Just took it for granted, didn't you?
Yes.
Who helped take care of this schoolhouse?
Well, two of the teachers I know, I think their husbands would, on weekends and things like that, they would help out. You know, if she had something that needed cleaning or, you know, they would do that. But we didn't, I don't remember any outside help.
Did your school have any kind of extra supplies?
Not a lot of supplies. Of course, they had the basic things that you needed, like some kind of toilet paper, I remember them. And they probably had a few cleaning supplies around there, but see, they were kind of undercover, and we were not to fool around with any of that kind of materials.
Did your school have a library?
I'm not sure. I wouldn't consider it a library. A few reference books here and there, I guess. It wasn't very complete,
Oh, okay.
if any.
8th grade exam. Did you take the 8th grade exam?
Yes, we did.
Do you remember preparing for it?
I don't remember doing any additional preparation for it. I know we learned to take a lot of notes when we were, what, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. I mean, it seemed like we had to write a lot of things down, and we had to memorize a certain amount of facts. And I know we don't do that today, but I think it was good. And of course, when we got 8th grade, and there came the day we had to go to West Union and take the exam. And of course, everything was handled by the county superintendent of schools. And I don't remember how long the exam was, but we got through it, we know that for sure.
Okay, now I think we'll have to skip the next page because I think we've done it.
That was done, yeah, okay. Okay,
What
but we did, oh, excuse
Go
me,
ahead. No, you go right ahead.
yeah, we didn't have a ceremony, if that's what you mean, I don't recall one.
And this would have been 19, at the beginning, 1947.
47,
So it's after the war.
yes, it was.
I can see maybe during the war or something, we might have done away with some of that. What did you do after graduation?
After graduation, of course, would have been summer and just helped on the farm, did our chores, did our usual routine until high school was going to start.
And tell us about that, going from a rural school, a country school, to the town high school.
Well, that was quite a bit different because we probably had right around 220 in high school. When you go from a one-room school, it was a culture shock. I was a very shy person, and but I did get in a lot of activities in high school. I was in speech. I remember I used to be in oratory. I remember giving a speech, and I believe it was the one for the county or something. And I was standing up there, and my knees were shaking, and I had goosebumps, and I was afraid I would forget part of it. And I think we had the local level or something, and I did advance to the county level. But I was rather happy that I didn't have to go on.
It's too hard on the heart.
Yes. And of course, I was in football 3 out of the 4 years. We started wrestling in my senior year. I think I could have made a fair wrestler if I would have had, we didn't have any, we just had a local meet with inter-squad meet, I guess you'd say. They didn't have competition then. Oh, let's see. I was in FFA. I received a State Farmer Award, and I was an officer, I think about every year. And when I was a freshman, we used to show hogs, and we show at the county fair, and 2 of the years we showed at the state fair. And I remember having the FFA Grand Champion at the state fair. And this was over the 4-H show and everything. And that was quite an honor. And I was just thinking about this. I think the litter pigs had 7 pigs. And they had a spring that fed a small creek. And I would let them run in there to keep cool. And when they went to the fair, they wouldn't settle down. And of course, one of them died, got overheated. And then I was down to 6 pigs. I was feeling pretty bad at that time because the hog showing wasn't until the next day. And I think we got over $300 and some out of this, just premiums alone, out of those 6 pigs.
So we're talking mid-40s.
They did pretty well. I remember the Voc Ag instructor brought more people out to see those pigs. And they must have thought they were good because I didn't know what a good hog even looked like. It was rather, yeah, rather interesting, you know. But that's kind of how I got my start in FFA. And then after that, a lot of the kids called me FFA Rich.
Oh,
You know, they thought I was rich from all that money.
$300.
I thought something kind of stuck with me, you know. Let's see, I was trying to think what else. And of course, we were, all of us were exceptional students. We were on the honor roll.
You're talking about you and your brothers now.
Yes, right, the whole family. And we wanted to do the right thing and achieve as much success as we could. And I remember in football, when we run our laps at the end of the practice, I wanted to be one of the first ones around. I didn't want to be the last one. I mean, I just had that pride, you know. So
you were a hard worker.
very hard.
Let's talk about the rural community in the school. How did the community politics affect the operation of your school?
Well, the parents were, I don't know, real close, I would say. There was no real significant effect on the school, but it seemed like the school got along very well. The kids learned, and apparently there must not have been any complaints.
How were the parents and community involved with the school?
Okay. We had several programs each year. The Christmas program was a big thing. And everyone had to memorize something, you know. And then they might have a little skit. And it seemed like the building would be full of parents and people that showed up, you know, because, you know, they had music, they'd have singing and so forth. And that tied the thing together a lot closer. And then it seemed like we had something in the spring too, kind of recognizing the achievements of the students. It was very brief. I mean, you know, like we have now, recognition, you know, for achievement. I think that was real good, and they turned out for that. And I remember having a potluck picnic once where they had parents
Would
come.
that been like the last day of school? Or the end of the
Probably,
year?
usually. Mm-hmm. I think it went very well.
What did you do once you left school at the end of the day?
At the end of the day, it was usually chores. Those calves were hungry. And then the milking had to be done. And we sold cream, and we'd have to put the separator together, and it had a lot of disc in the bowl that goes around, and that was our job to assemble that. And I think we even had to help wash it, you know. So there was plenty to do. We had to care for our projects too. I mean, I remember one time we had some chickens. I remember receiving $24 for the chickens that I sold, the cockerels. We were kids. And we thought that was pretty good.
Did you have homework?
Usually we had some, but not a lot. Well, most of it we get done in school. I mean, it's getting at it and doing it, you know. I don't remember a whole lot of homework. Occasionally we had some. Spelling was a big thing. We had to study for the spelling test, and we wouldn't dare miss a word. Mom was very strict about that. My parents were both very strict. And just a show of force is all we needed to motivate us. I know we learned a little bit about writing a short story, you know, something happened, you know, and maybe 2 or 3 characters in it, you know. I remember doing that, but so I think some of these teachers were kind of ahead of their time. And that's still hard for some students to do today.
What major local, national, or world events happened during your childhood?
Okay, we went through a bad depression, of course. Example of that was, I know my mom had, I think she probably got accumulated through her family. She grew up. I know she lost $600 when the bank closed. Now, I don't remember exactly when that closed. I don't remember that part of it, but she told us about it, you know. And that was a real blow then. That was a lot of money. Also, World War II. There was a lot of fear. You'd hear about all these casualty reports, whether we won this battle or lost that battle, you know, and it was uncertain times, I would say. And then in was it 44 or 45, I can't remember, when President Roosevelt passed away, you know. And I remember that was on the radio, and we all felt bad because we had a lot of respect for, when he talked, they listened. Great speaker. There was gas rationing, but being the fact we were a farm unit, I think we got a double allotment, so it didn't affect us quite as much. Let's see, I think those are probably the main things.
And do you think those things affected your school life at all?
Very little. I mean, we tried to be resilient, you know, not to let that affect us emotionally too.
Do you remember influenza or quarantines?
Okay. Well, we feared tornadoes because one of the reasons why in 1915 they had a tornado that came to our farm. Of course, we don't remember, we weren't born yet, but they said it took one of the chicken houses and came very close to the house. And there was always that fear, I guess, after that it might happen again. And I think it took a machine shed or something too. Didn't hurt the barn because it was on the other end of the farmstead. They feared polio because that's what President died from the effects of that. He had polio when he was young. Flu was bad too, you know. Well, they might not have called it flu, but that's what it was.
In what ways did World War I or World War II affect the school?
One thing, I guess, being the fact our parents were farmers, we had pretty good prices, you know, came up, you know. After we got out of the Depression, and then of course it raised the prices. And I don't remember the gas shortage, how long that went on. And there was also a sugar shortage too. They rationed sugar. Of course, that was probably a good thing as far as we were concerned.
How did the Depression affect the school?
Well, let's see. I guess you would say things were a little more dismal then. People didn't have much to look forward to, particularly the farm people. Prices were very low before and during the Depression, and there wasn't very much money that was being made in any kind of job or enterprise that they might be engaged in. They weren't as optimistic, let's put it that way. But it really didn't affect the school a whole lot.
Can you think of any special events that were held at your school?
Well, I remember one was they did bobbing for apples. I don't know, that wasn't too good, but I remember doing it. And of course, the Christmas program was probably the highlight of the year. And the students showing off what they could actually do. And of course, I think the parents, they couldn't realize that some of those students could do those things. They were capable, you know, that much capability of memorizing a whole lot of lines or stanzas and so forth, you know. And it had quite an effect on the younger kids too, the younger kids that would be coming to that school, you know, growing up. I think it gave them the idea they couldn't wait till they got to the school, I mean, of school age. There was a lot more interaction between the parents and the teachers at that time, and the teacher in this case. And I think that was good. I mean, if we could have that happen more today, we would solve a lot of our problems. Everyone had two parents then, and we didn't have the separated families. And so the family will always be the basic unit of society. But when the family breaks up, then that's when problems develop.
Do you know of other ways that your school building was used besides just for school and school functions?
Well, I don't remember it being used for anything else.
Sometimes they were used for voting or church services.
Oh, I don't
meetings.
know if they were, I don't remember voting. I know as far as the outside of the school, the yard, we thought playing in the leaves was a big thing as far as recreation then, and recesses and so forth. And just sitting under the trees and teeter-tottering and so forth, playing our games, playing croquet, we just loved that. And of course, if the other person hit your ball or you hit their ball, then you could railroad them, you know, and set them back in the scheme of winning. You know, we didn't always do that. It just depended, you know, some of them might not, they'd be a little more offended than others, you know, so forth. You had to be careful on that.
What was your favorite part of the day?
Well, I think recess. The morning recess, and noon, you know, because when school was out, we didn't have time to hang around. We had to start out walking.
What's your worst memory of country school?
Okay. Well, I was thinking about this one. And I remember one thing we did. There was a crow's nest up in one of these big maple trees. And I don't know why we did it. We brought a small trap to school. It was like a number 1 or something, you know, it's a small trap, not very powerful. And we put it in the nest, the crow nest, and we caught a crow. The teacher didn't particularly appreciate that. And she insisted, she thought I did it, I guess, but I was in on it, I'll admit, that I climb up and let the crow out of the trap. Because the crow started hollering. It was in pain, you know. They had to do this sometime during school. I thought it was sort of comical at the time, but now I say I can see why. It seemed like that's about the worst thing I could have done.
What lessons from country schools might we benefit from today?
Okay. Well, the parents were involved in everything then. Everything that revolved around what the parents did and showed the concern for their welfare of their kids. And if the kids did something, or we did something in this case, the parents were the first ones to find out about it. They were our first line of defense. But the interaction of the parents and teacher was the key to making the country school work or function. And Rolling Green was blessed with good teachers. We didn't have a poor teacher in the group. I mean, they just all did their job. Now,
were there any disadvantages?
Yes, there were some downsides too. The hardship of getting to and from school, especially in bad weather. That was the bad part about it. I remember it getting real cold, and one time, I don't remember what year it was, when we went to bed that night, it was 29 below zero. But the next morning, the 34 Chevy would not even budge. So consequently, I don't believe they had school. I think they called it off, you know. Well, I mean, they didn't notify you, but we knew that no one would dare be out, you know. And I think it got down to 45 below that time. And the town of El Dorado, you know where that is, they recorded, I think, 50 below, unofficially. Another disadvantage was limited activities for development. You only had certain things that you could do that were possible under the situation. I mentioned culture shock when you went to high school. It was, that was something you hadn't had a lot of experiences that kids in town have in town schools, city schools. Communications with people was harder then because about the only thing you had, I remember we had a crude telephone, you know, to communicate. But everybody kept up with the news by listening in when a certain person's, if it wasn't your ring, they still listened in. That's how they kept up to date, I guess. No technology learning of any kind. I mean, well, there wasn't any such thing. Because we didn't have computers, we didn't have calculators, and I know I graduated from college twice. Didn't even have a calculator, hadn't been born yet. Less social development in a one-room school because being in a class by yourself, a person doesn't know what competition is. And when you get in high school, you feel that competition when you got 15, 20 in your class. Then classes were a lot smaller. No career exploration. We didn't know what the word career meant, you know. Where they get to find out whether they like something, they might like to do it, you know, and they get out to play that role, maybe even for a day or so, you know.
Could one-room schoolhouses be successful today?
I don't believe so. I guess you'd say time is moving too fast. Our environment is changing so rapidly, but they sort of bridged the gap during the 30s and 40s. And that's, I guess, when they reached their prime, you know, most of them were there then. I don't believe they would be able to fill the bill today. And where would our students be if they didn't have their little gizmos they work with all the time?
Is there anything else we should know about life in rural schools?
Well, I will say that I'll always cherish the memories and experiences because I think they were good memories then. But I will say that it seemed like there wasn't much derogatory things going on in the school like we have now. There were still, I guess you'd say there were still, I guess, if you want to call them bullies or what, to a certain extent. There's always some that try to take advantage, you know. But, and we're always going to have those, you know. But the things weren't as drastic as they can be nowadays. Well, I'm glad I was a part of it. That's what I'll say.
Dick, this has been wonderful. Thank you. You were so well prepared.
Well,
You,
you try to be.
you didn't. Yeah, they taught you that well, didn't they?
Well, I think so.
They sure did. Very good. Very nice.
Yeah. Now, us that went to college, my older brother farmed. But after he got out of the army, then he was married, and he kind of married into the money a little bit. And the father-in-law made the down payment on the farm, you know, but he did very wonderful farming.
50s and 60s were
Yeah,
good for farming.
Very good, you know. And my younger brother, he got his master's degree at Purdue, and I got mine from the University of Wisconsin, River Falls. And I was big in science, and I applied for a science institute. And I went up there for 5 summers, and then I wrote the thesis. And then my daughter went to University of Iowa State Teachers College then, and she taught some years, you know.
All right. You mean your sister?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Very good.
And her husband got into the building business then.